everybody, welcome back to Quali-Tea time. I've retooled this little layout a bit, so hopefully this is looking a bit better. I actually have basically no idea how I'm framed. I'm using the Remember Cam GoPro here, which is Remember Go, I think is the name of it, but I have no idea how I'm actually framed because I'm using the LCD screen on the back, and of course I can't see that right now at all, or indeed at any point when this microphone is attached, which will also hopefully fix up the audio issues we had last time. So yeah, I actually can hook the GoPro up to my tablet, which I need to do at some point, but not quite right now. Anyways, the big question that I'm sure everybody has is, why am I not releasing videos right now? What happened last week? There's really no great way to say this. My grandfather passed away around 4 o'clock Thursday. Ostensibly, he injured his hip in his kitchen at some point, and it wasn't healing right for some reason, and then they discovered that he actually has systemic terminal cancer or something of that ilk. So he had literally hours to live when we got the news. My mum rushed down there, and I had the idea that I had too much work to get done, but in the end I got nothing done, and we then got the final news, if you will, a few hours later. And you can imagine that kind of wrecked me. And at that point I really couldn't do any work, so I couldn't work to the buffer. The buffer depleted again, as it did when my executive dysfunction happened not too recently. It's been a rough few weeks. A rough sort of month period, not necessarily calendar month period. Yeah, I've never lost a grandparent before. Very few people actually in my life have died, so I don't have a protocol for this. So it's been rough, but I've been working through it, and Fuzz has been here to help me out, and I'm hoping to get back to work soon. So you will hopefully see videos this forthcoming week. Just not this one. I should still be doing live streams this week, but I obviously was not in any condition to do them over the weekend, and especially not that Thursday, which would have been midnight. So hopefully you can forgive me for that. It's an unusual circumstance, thankfully, but I guess I'm getting to the age where it's starting to become a bit more common, or a bit more likely. It definitely sucks that it was cancer, because my granddad died at, like, age 73. He had been smoking like a chimney since, like, his 20s, or earlier even, and now it gets him, but also it gets him and we didn't even see it coming. He literally went from pretty much a picture of a man to gone overnight, and it also it just came right on the heels this year of my grandmother on the other side of my family having to fight the same disease, albeit, I think, in a different region of the body, as it were. And it's rough. It's been very rough. But I've done my deep breathing, I've done my crying, and we have the funeral this Friday, so we'll see how I'm doing after that. But I think I'm getting back on my feet. I don't know if this is like a rapid turnaround or slow. I don't have experience here, but I guess I'll find out fairly soon. But yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. But how about some happier news, eh? Right. So, I got the forms filled out and posted them off, and a few days later I have actually received a bit of word from the P.O. Box team over at Royal Mail. So, active from the 20th of May, for a couple of months. I don't know how long exactly, but it's probably not going to be longer than free, just because of the cost. You will be able to send postage here via the P.O. Box, and that is at, I'll probably have this on the screen somewhere, probably to my left because I know there's a lot of space there, P.O. Box 533, 5 and 3 are actually remarkably my lucky numbers, Middlesbrough, Tango Sierra 1, 9 EQ. Or extra quality, or whatever, however you want to, like, go NATO on that. And, obviously, that's in the currently United Kingdom, and that will end up at a discreet location that I can then go and grab, and we can have some mail time here on the vlog. And next, I suppose, we have the section that everybody wants me to talk about, which is I recently went to go see Alien Covenant. I have opinions. One moment, let me do some set dressing here. Right, that's a bit better. So, let's obviously start with the good things about this movie. You're gonna be getting spoilers in on this, so let me just say that straight up. Hi, there's gonna be a lot of spoilers in this discussion, as one would expect. Just skip ahead and you'll find, like, the schedule or something. Anyways. It's very pretty. It looks very much similar to how Prometheus looked. The music is pretty dang good. It does very well to be, for the most part, subtle and in support of things that are happening on screen without being this grand, big kind of overture. There's a couple of scenes that heavily rely on music, which is a thing, but that's fine. The cast in this movie, which again is following the Prometheus line, Prometheus had a big problem of, don't touch the thing. Everyone proceeds to touch everything, especially David the android. The cast in this movie are a lot less touch everything. It's very clear that they have a chain of command, they have protocols. If there is a conflict, they discuss it, and then they choose, they determine from there what to do. The captain makes it extremely clear that he is making decisions based on the available data, and that's good, that's what you want to be seeing in a leadership role. And it all works fine until the first thing goes wrong. And then it goes pretty much out the window, and it is ludicrously bad. You get little hints of it later on down the movie, but for the most part it is just gone. And that's bad. These people are not... they're not working very well. But that first thing where things go wrong, the first time you actually encounter the aliens. So, the first alien event is black goo gas, I guess, goes into somebody's ear, and then the alien, which we'll call a neomorph for purposes of recognition, pops out of somebody's back. And another one pops out of their throat. I get the feeling they don't actually have, like, a defined route to go at that stage. And, okay, before it's even out of his back, like, the medbay has been locked with somebody else still in there, so that's already bad protocol. And then it breaks out. Kills the guy, obviously, because no spine. Kills the person that was in there, and person who locked them in goes to get a shotgun, basically. It opens up the medbay, goes back inside, slips on blood. You couldn't make this up. This is slapstick. Shoots the ceiling. The alien gets out, obviously, and then destroys the entire goddamn planetary lander trying to shoot it in the dock bay, and just... This is ludicrous. I'm pretty sure it even survives. Like, the Neomorph doesn't even, like, die in that whole spree. But it is just... It's horrific slapstick from the worst slasher movie you could find. Like, you know the standard cliche of the damsel in distress is fleeing from the axe-wielding murderer, and then is in high heels or something and trips on the slightest branch, and is, like, then crawling on her back away from it. It's just... That's what we had here. It was terrible. It was, like, you got the sense this is not someone maybe this is someone who's scared, but this is not someone who is remotely following any kind of protocol, and it was awful. And it's also worth noting that we have, at that point, no reason to care for any of these characters, because you open up the movie as a big event, which is called a neutrino wave, I think, which I don't know if that's actually a thing, but I'm also, on the basis that it's a stellar event, pretty damn certain you should see that coming from a couple, 1,000 kilometers. But you wake up, and immediately the captain dies, which is kind of okay, personally, but he just roasts inside of his cryo sleep pod. And I honestly couldn't tell you the names of half the crew. That's how forgettable they were. Which was fine, because I then spent most of the movie staring at them and saying, oh, you know, he did. Daniels and Tennessee are the two that stick out, for the most part. Tennessee, because, of course, he's got a nice cowboy hat, and he's usually up on the Covenant. And Daniels, because she takes on a sort of Ripley role nearer to the end of the movie. But these people are dying, and they're all very sad about the captain being dead at the start, and they're increasingly sad as things go on, but more people die, and I just have no reason to care at all. I'm being introduced to these people as they are suffering and dying. I don't have an attachment to them, which is really bad writing, because if you want the audience to care if someone dies, you need to make them care about them. So that didn't work. So, well, that's the cast, just sort of, bumbling along, doing the things. And then there's the aliens. Now, the aliens that you meet, the neomorphs, are what the black goo out of people, more or less. It's like the starfish alien that comes near to the end of Prometheus and such. But also, there's no mention of the zombie. In Prometheus, there was one character who is infected by the black goo and basically becomes a zombie, and nothing does that at all in this movie, which is a bit odd. But anyways, the neomorphs that you meet are very much described as animalistic. The black goo does one of two things. It either murders you outright, or it uses you as an incubator for a creature that will go on to kill more people. It's fairly apparent that the engineers, who are the white-skinned giant people, created the black goo as a form of bioweapon. They didn't seem particularly advanced when we got there, but apparently that's a thing. But even then, you have the neomorphs, who, from the engineers, are pretty big creatures. But then you also have the actual xenomorphs start to appear, the black-skinned, pipe-backed kind of creatures that we're familiar with. Only they're idiots. They run around two very much lumbering, dangerous, they're like an angry jaguar, for the most part. Which is not what a xenomorph is. Xenomorphs, from their very first example, are incredibly stealthy creatures. They hide in nooks and crannies and dim lighting and whatnot. And they sneak up on their prey. That's why in the first movie, there is one xenomorph, and instead of charging at a whole group of people, it kills them off one by one. I think it only encounters two people in one particular scene in that entire movie. This is a creature who is known for being discreet, for being sly, for finding ways to ambush and flank its targets. But it's just sort of running around, doing stuff in plain vision. There's not the slightest hint of difficulty in even tracking the thing, because the Covenant's sensors can find it. So the xenomorph just sort of falls flat, the neomorphs are just creatures, and that brings me to my biggest complaint of this entire movie, which is the entirety of the David the Android arc is utter garbage. Well, that's, David, by the way, is the android from Prometheus, who's going touch everything. But anyways, David and Elizabeth Shaw, who's the last survivor of the Prometheus from the last movie, apparently arrive on this planet and nuke it. But the reason that the Covenant team has gotten here is because they picked up a signal from Shaw singing Country Road, which is also featured heavily in the trailers. Overall, they get maybe less than 30 seconds of screen time. We never see... We never find context for that signal. We never hear even the original, like, full Shaw singing Country Road. She's just a really badly archived hologram. But this is the entire reason the cast is here. Why don't we find out more about this? Why did you make this your entire sales pitch? It's terrible. It's not even entirely clear what happened to Shaw, just that she is ostensibly buried at some point by David in the past 10 years. But, firstly, like, this is where we get into David being on his own and doing stuff. Firstly, apparently the Neomorphs reproduce. It's not clear how, but apparently they breed, because David has bred them, and apparently he's done a bit of genetic manipulation of his own as well, but it's weird. But the sheer concept of David, the man-made, the human-made android, engineering from the Neomorphs to create the Xenomorphs, is bad. That diminishes them quite a bit. Now, for reference, when Aliens came out and the Alien Queen was added, there was a big uproar about whether or not the introduction of the Queen, thereby making the entire Xenomorph collective species be a bit of a sort of insect colony, there was a discussion whether or not that made the aliens less alien, if it made them more relatable and understandable. And I think that the Alien Queen has ultimately proved herself, but that's a good point. The reason that the alien, or at least part of the reason the alien was so terrifying originally, was because we had no experience with something like this. We had no frame of reference for it. And adding the Queen made them an insect colony, so we understood them a bit better. It's like, oh, if you kill the Queen, the rest of the hive will collapse and just go wild and whatnot. But until you kill the Queen is just pumping out eggs and things are going. It made them understandable to us. In the same token, having the aliens be, by extension of David, a man-made thing makes them more comprehensible. I don't know really how David's engineering is going to be seen down the line. Personally, right now, I think it's a bad idea. I think it was a better situation when they were less known, when they were less aligned with humanity. The fact that we now understand that they were actually engineered by a human-made intelligence, not a human intelligence, but a human-made intelligence, I don't like that. And what's more, it's established by David that these things restructure DNA, that they are no longer in a gaseous form, they have basically taken over a lot of the wildlife of the planet already, and that they apparently breed. So we had all of the elements for them to happen, for the Xenomorphs to become a thing, without David's interference at all. But we apparently had to go that road, because why not? But this then brings me to my big idea with regards to this movie, which is the entire last scene could have happened without dialogue. Now, just to quickly refresh your memory, probably mostly mine, the last scene is that Walter, who is David's lookalike on the Covenant crew, is putting all the remaining crew members, that's Daniels and Nancy, into cryosleep. Daniels is the last one, and she asks him if he'll help her build her log cabin by the lake. And he apparently doesn't recognize this information, and she realizes that she's speaking to David. And then she starts screaming whilst cryosleep is initiating, and then David goes off and does his thing. I originally thought that David had actually just physically replaced Walter, that he'd cut off his hand and got some facial disfigurement from their fight and whatnot, and changed clothes and met up with the crew, but it didn't seem that there was enough time for that.
looking it up, what apparently actually happened was that David overwrote Walter's programming with his own, and I have even less idea of when that could have happened. Like, that makes even less sense, but that last scene, there is no reason for David to reveal his presence to Daniels at all. There's no advantage to that, because for one thing, now he has a cryo tube he can't open because she'll immediately start trying to stop him in his plans and machinations and whatnot. And for another, it would have just been so much easier to do things if she was still on his side of believing he was Walter. So, what he could have done, because apparently he still had, like, you wouldn't even need to know about the cabin in the lake idea and what that's a reference to. You would have just had to go along with it and say, yes, of course I'll help you, that kind of thing. And then, cryo tube goes down, Daniels is happily asleep, David goes off and plants the facehugger embryos inside the cryo tubes and whatnot. And then music can fade in from like a distance with a slight echo through space or whatever, and cut to black, credits roll. And that's a much more ominous kind of ending. And that's a very good way to do it, because the Aliens franchise rarely deals in absolutes. It rarely deals in, they are definitely fine at the end of it. That kind of certainty doesn't happen very often inside of Aliens, so I think it would have been better to have it be more ominous as an ending, as opposed to, you are definitely screwed. Also, why did he have to regurgitate the eggs? This is literally a colony ship. There's cargo everywhere. You could have just put them anywhere you like. Why did you store them in yourself? Blech. So yeah, ultimately, I think I had certain expectations going into this particular movie, and those expectations were that it would be pretty but poorly written, and my expectations were exactingly met. But anyways, off to the schedule, shall we? Of course, this week we are not having any more videos because I have to rebuild the buffer and I have to deal with some stuff, so streams will be continuing from Thursday with Midnight Souls at 11 PM BST. We've got a new area to explore and I'm sure it'll kill me a lot. On Saturday at 9 PM BST over at twitch.tv/DragonHat, we have Dungeons and Dragon Hats. Videos return on Monday with an episode of Spurring Realms. Then on Tuesday, it's an episode of Edgington as we talk about the importance and methods of self-care. We also have York Dwarves live at 9 PM BST. And lastly, for this particular vlog, at least on Wednesday, we have an episode of Mating Do. And on to the questions. So as always, these are drawn from the comments section of the preceding vlog. If you have anything you want to ask me, leave it down below, or failing that, send me a letter. We'll see if it gets answered in the P.O. Fox section. Our first question of the week comes from Adnara Stormcloud. Out of all the Lying Verse worlds, which would you live in? There's a lot of the worlds that aren't exactly hospitable to my needs, as it were. I think I would go with living in Yokai Village, from Yokai Temple series, but that's also the place that the witch was in the course of Witch in the Woods, and additionally, it's the same universe that Flux Buddies 2.0, I think it is, and Flux Baddies happened in, so it might be overrun by abominations. I'm not sure. I trust Lying Shisai to keep Yokai Village safe, so I'm going to go with Yokai Village. Too Many Fandoms asks, is the Inquisitor, Ignalane, of the Lost Hands gay? Hella! AI13 asks, are there any non-human lyings? There isn't any specific qualification that says that a lying has to be a red maker or a human analog, but it is true that a lot of them are, because most universes tend to have a sort of human or red maker analog. There are some non-human lyings. We've kind of heard about one or two of them already. Being a lying isn't a human-specific thing. It seems to be the case that most lyings are short, but there are some tall lyings. It seems to be the case that most lyings have long blonde hair, but there are some lyings with short brown hair. It seems to be the case that most lyings are white and male, but that's not a universal trait. It's there's a lot of traits that recur more than others, but doesn't mean that they're locked in. Most of the traits that specifically are always in a line are personality traits, and that doesn't have to be human specific. Lastly, out of the questions this week, we have Dual Apocalypsian, who asks, will you and Fuzz be going to MCM London this year? Usually October seems to be like the main time that we can actually manage to get to MCM. I don't know what's happening this year because our usual source of housing for that kind of weekend might not be in London. We're gonna try, at the very least. I mean, the better the Patreon does, the easier it is for us to attend conventions, because expenses on conventions are huge for us currently. But here's hoping. Anyways, that's it for this week. I apologize once again for another lapse in content production. As I say, it's been a rough couple of weeks. But we should, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, be back to normal next week. With that in mind, catch you all next time.